there, Buttercups. Your resident Teabelle here. Welcome to Hark, 'tis the Teabelle. Let's dive in for that tea today, huh? Okay, Buttercups. Last week, if you recall, we had talked about Forrest Gump, right? And Forrest, who was really the boy who should not have done much, had just mooned the country. And why? Because the President of the United States, President Johnson, had asked him to show off the wounded area. And of course, that was in the buttocks. Now, he had been awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery. And if you recall, his bravery was saving his fellow soldiers. Now, Mama Bear was super proud, and she might have been resting, but Forrest, well, he was walking around exploring and ends up on a stage of anti-war protesters, okay? Now, it's interesting because when he's describing the man on the microphone and introducing the soldiers from the war who are now protesting it, he's not sure why people are cheering or why they cheer louder when this man who's wearing a shirt that could be made of the American flag says the F word. Well, eventually, Forrest is pushed up the stairs where he does take his place in front of many people, but guys, many people. And they're quieting down rather quickly because they want to hear what he has to say. What's interesting is that for a guy who was never allowed to talk to people because they didn't want to talk to him, he is now in front of thousands of people to talk about his time in the war, right? Now he is about to speak, and suddenly you see an angry man in a military uniform pulling wires out so that when Forrest does actually speak, the majority of his words aren't heard by the crowd. They can be heard by the people around him, but not by the crowd. And the man wearing the American flag shirt says, "That's so right on, man. That says it all." Now, the crowd is legitimately like, what did he say? But obviously, they're never going to get to hear that, and neither are we. Interestingly enough, when he introduces himself, right, they're like, "What's your name, man?" Forrest Gump. It doesn't take maybe 30 seconds to hear Jenny calling out through the crowd as she realizes who is on the stage, okay? She is running through the water, and he is running through that crowd, and they part so that he can make his way through the water to his Jenny. And this crowd is cheering because they're reunited. It's awesome, guys. It is awesome. Now, later, they're exploring the area they're in, and Forrest ends up, y'all, in the headquarters of the Black Panthers. This man who just got a Medal of Honor, this man who just spoke, really did, but nobody could hear him, at an anti-war rally is now in the headquarters of the Black Panthers. Now, you have the leader of the Black Panthers explaining why they do what they do. And Forrest isn't trying to be rude, we know this. But his gaze is straying to Jenny and her current other half. And this man messes up, y'all. And we know what this means because when he hits Jenny, what do you think Forrest is going to do? He is in the middle of a Black Panthers meeting, and he doesn't care about anything else but the fact that that man just hit his Jenny. Well, Forrest decides to go wide, and nothing else matters in that moment. And he starts a fight in the middle of the Black Panthers meeting. Now, don't get me wrong, this guy deserved to get his butt kicked because he should not have been hitting Jenny. But what's funny is that the guy who got his butt beat doesn't apologize at all, but Forrest does. Now, this group is not sure how to take Forrest, if you really want to be honest, because he just spoke at an anti-war rally, he got the Medal of Honor, he's still in the military. Like, he's not your typical guy, is he? Because he's not even responding to them like they expect. But he does apologize to the group of people really ready to retaliate. And what does he say? Sorry, I had a fight in the middle of your Black Panther party. Well, he doesn't want to, you know, start problems, but the man shouldn't have been hitting his Jenny. And truth be told, he wasn't wrong. Now, Jenny and Forrest leave because they were forced to, but this allows them to catch up pretty much all night. And so we are going to learn about her life since they had really lost talked. And we learned she had been traveling. She had experienced new ways to expand her mind and live in harmony. Now, we have to remember the time and the place where this movie takes place, all right? The time and the place. So, a lot of you are probably going to go, okay, Jenny, right? But that doesn't matter to Forrest. Forrest is just so happy to see Jenny again. Now, the next morning, she and Forrest are just standing there talking when the other half, who Forrest just beat the crap out of, walks up to them and he apologizes to Jenny. And I say that in quotations because he deflects. It's just this war. It's just everything else. You know I wouldn't hurt you. Well, you did hurt her because you hit her. But sure, you do you, boo-boo. Now, he's definitely and clearly afraid of Forrest, which, I mean, do you blame him? He just got his behind beat by him. Like, I don't blame him. Now, Forrest speaks up and he goes, he thinks she should go back to Alabama. And Jenny realistically explains to him, Forrest, we have very different lives, you know. And the thing that gets me here is that Jenny is still that same lost little girl. She's just now in the body of a grown woman. And Forrest, just being who Forrest was, gifts the Medal of Honor he just received to Jenny. And Jenny doesn't want to take it. She knows what he did to get it, and she takes it though because she knows he's not going to back down. So she asks him why he's so good to her, and she's really not sure why. She's genuinely sure. And he tells her, you're my girl. And this, y'all, is why I know that Jenny loves this man, whether or not she wants to admit that she feels like she's not good enough. And all she says to him is, I'll always be your girl. Well, that current boyfriend, man, Forrest does glare at him enough to know that that guy probably should be smarter about what he's going to do and never hit Jenny again. He knows he's messed up, right? And that is hysterical to me. But sadly, he essentially loses his girl again, doesn't he? Because she gets on that bus to go back to wherever she's going and to do whatever she's doing. So, bless her heart, she's pretty much on this journey of trying to figure out what to do with her life and how to feel like she's doing what she needs to do. Is she enough? Is she doing what she needs to be doing? And heaven help her. She's just taking her time. Now, we recall that Forrest was a ping pong champion, right? Well, they restructured him as a special forces officer, I guess, so he could continue playing ping pong, all right? Now, what does this mean? This means that he traveled around the country entertaining down and out troops and teaching them how to play ping pong if they wanted to play. He even went to China on the All-American ping pong team. Now, when he came home, he was a national celebrity. So much so that he went on a late night talk show, where he met John Lennon. Now, we know what happened to John Lennon, but in true Forrest fashion, this is what he had to say about the death of John Lennon. For no particular reason at all, somebody shot him. Now, this was also after he explains that he was just going home to see his little boy. Right? Now, Forrest is leaving this talk show, and he's just kind of on cloud nine, like, man, look at that's cool. when we see someone from his past. Lieutenant Dan has been living in New York on the government's dime, and Lieutenant Dan is not impressed. Okay? Now, how do we know? Because he says, they gave you the Congressional Medal of Honor. They gave you the Congressional Medal of Honor. They gave you an imbecile, a moron who goes on television and makes a fool out of himself in front of the whole damn country. The Congressional Medal of Honor. Well, that's just perfect. Now he's muttering as he is sliding down, in this icy slippery ramp, right? And Forrest runs down to, help him because I'm pretty sure he fell out of his wheelchair. Now, Lieutenant Dan is clearly not adapting well to, his circumstances. And with Forrest being in the same place, they do spend some time together, since they now see each other. And we also can see that the living arrangements that Lieutenant Dan is living in aren't really the best, right? And that's just what it is. But at this time, we can see that Lieutenant Dan is also questioning God, his beliefs on it, and also his relationship on it. Because he is told if he accepts Jesus in his heart, he can walk beside him in heaven. And this enrages Lieutenant Dan. And can you blame him? Like, I totally get it, because what does he say? Walk with him, right? Okay. Well, he has no legs. Right now he is a cripple, right? And has no he doesn't think it's going to get better. There's no way this is going to get better in Lieutenant Dan's mind, right? So he just is resigned to the fact that this is going to be his life for the rest of his life, for however long that should last. And what can you blame him? It's not that he doesn't believe. I don't believe that he believed he had a destiny, right? That's what we remember about Lieutenant. He had a destiny. And now he doesn't know how to live this life without that destiny. Now, they're doing their things, hanging out, and Forrest does share with him that he has plans to be a shrimping boat captain. And this actually does make Lieutenant Dan laugh, genuinely. And he says to him, I'll tell you what, Gilligan, the day you're a shrimping boat captain, I will come and be your first mate. Be careful what you wish for, Lieutenant Dan. Now, we're at a bar, and two women walk up to Forrest and Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan introduces them as Cunning Carla and Long Limbs Lenore. Now, one of them says, don't you just love New Year's? You can start all over. Everybody gets a second chance. Right? And this is where we circle back to Jenny, because of course Forrest is thinking of Jenny, which I'm sure he does all the time. And we see that Jenny is gathering her things up, but not before she does take a look at her blackened eye in the mirror. And I think that's her resolve to leave. She slams the door shut to leave as the ball is dropping. She's not going to stay in a situation that does not suit her anymore. And for that, I'm so proud of her, because if you look at the past Jenny, she would have just taken it. And in this case, maybe she just hit enough, right? Now, we go back where Forrest is standing in that bar where Lieutenant Dan is just looking miserable. But, again, he believes that his life is over. He doesn't know why he was saved. Like, what purpose does he serve, right? He does not know what his purpose is based on the way he's living and the way that he's built now, right? Well, it's later, I assume that same evening, when Forrest, Lieutenant Dan, and these two ladies, and possibly of the night, are back at Lieutenant Dan's hotel, right? And so Lieutenant Dan and his friend, they're getting along. But it doesn't seem like Forrest and his friend are getting along. He is clearly not interested in her or her very forward actions. at that moment. And so she says some not so nice things, which leads the other lady that Lieutenant Dan is being friendly with to jokingly ask if Forrest is stupid. This is the trigger that Lieutenant Dan probably didn't know he had. And he just says, "What did you say? Don't call him stupid. Don't you ever call him stupid." Right? Now the ladies are told to leave, and they leave, but not before they insult the two men, right? And Forrest, again, is apologizing. He didn't mean to stop the party. "I'm sorry I ruined your New Year's Eve party, Lieutenant Dan. She tasted like cigarettes." Now, Lieutenant Dan may not want to admit it, but he is Forrest's friend, even if he hasn't said so. And he understands. I guess Lieutenant Dan figured there's some things you just can't change. He didn't want to be called crippled, just like I didn't want to be called stupid. Right? Lieutenant Dan knows what it's like, and he respects Forrest enough to not let people disrespect him the way that it was being done, right? Now, we recall that Forrest has met the president for the All-American football team and for the Medal of Honor. Well, the U.S. ping pong team met with the Oval Office today. Wouldn't you know it? A few months later, they invited me and the ping pong team to the White House. So I went again, and I met the President of the United States again. This is like his third time, right? Now, the president asks where Forrest is staying, and he names it, and the president's like, "Oh, no, no, no. I'm going to talk to my people, and we're going to upgrade you, right?" Well, he sure is upgraded. Because Forrest makes a call, though, in the middle of the night, like, "Hey, I don't know if the breaker, something happened with the breaker, but can you tell them to quit using their flashlights? Like, I can't sleep." Now, what do we see on the screen next? We see the president is resigning, and Vice President Bush is to be the new president. Yes. Watergate, anybody? Question mark? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Now, it's not long after this whole debauchery thing is going because, he is discharged from the army. Now, he's standing there, and as the guy who discharged him walks away, all four says, "Does this mean I can't play ping pong anymore? No more?" And for the army, it does, Forrest. And man, he runs and he goes home. Now, Mama Bear is admittedly older, right? She's looking a little bit older, but we know that happens. But she is so thrilled to see her son walking towards her. And everybody was trying to befriend Mama Bear, right? Smart move on their parts. Now, Mama Bear wants to make sure that Forrest does the right thing, but she can see that there are certain things that will benefit him that he won't see. So she tries to gently encourage him to try a new paddle. Even though Forrest says, "Well, I only like using my own paddle, Mama." But she says, "Well, just put it in your hand, see how it feels, Forrest." And why is she doing this? Well, that man left a $25,000 check for him to say he preferred using their paddle. Now, what happens? That Mama, he learns to like that paddle, okay? Which means that he got to keep that $25,000 check. True to his word, though, he did meet Bubba's family, right? And they're questioning his intelligence. Like, "Dude, why are you trying to go in the shrimp pen? You've never shrimped. Like, are you in? What's wrong with you?" And he's like, "Well, I made a promise." And then he visits Bubba, of course, and he updates on them everything. And then with that $25,000 check, he begins his new career as Captain Forrest Gump, right? And even the man where he bought the boat, right, has no faith, none whatsoever, because he is also questioning his intelligence. There's no one here that says, "Hey, Forrest, you know what, you got this." They're all going, "Dude, why are you doing this? I don't understand," Which tells us that when you go to do something like that, it's easy to look and say, oh no, you're gonna fail, but Forrest has pretty much succeeded in everything he's done. So why on earth wouldn't he succeed? Especially if you think about the fact that every time he's done something, he's succeeded because he's had a decent support system. So, I mean, not all ventures work out, but you make the best of what you have, right? Now, one thing Forrest learns really, really kind of quickly is that what he is doing is not easy. Okay? Not at all. And then, of course, he's told it's not good luck to have a boat that's not named. So he names it. Now, do you even need to take one guess? More than one guess of what it was? Jenny. Now, the real Jenny, though, in life is she's in a club doing some not so nice things. And she's drifting aimlessly and she's going along with the flow, but she doesn't know how to stop this negative flow, right? And the regret is etched on her face. And so it comes to a point where the regret and the illegal substances that she is doing come together. And she is what seems like to be contemplating jumping into traffic below her. But her heel slips and she reconsiders. She's crying as she gets down and she's clearly miserable. Okay. She's not. I don't know how to say this, so just know that I do not condone that type of that type of thing. But that's not how to say this. That is kind of a taboo subject, right? I would never consider it myself. Um and I understand that the pain people get to, probably the pain that Jenny's at, it can be the probably most the best thing that you can do at that moment. But in truth, it is not. It is just the demons talking to you, right? And so as she's sitting there crying, you can see she's glad she didn't do it, but she doesn't know how to change her life. What is she gonna do to fix this? Because holy moly, what is she? How can she fix it when she has no idea how to even move forward? And bless poor Jenny's heart, she really is in a bad position. But we move over to see that as Forrest is on his boat, right, Lieutenant Dan is on the dock. He sits in his wheelchair and he looks cleaned up. And, well, Lieutenant Dan is as good as his word, right? So Forrest jumps into the water to swim to the dock excitedly to go see Lieutenant Dan. He doesn't stop his boat, though, so his boat is going without him. What are you doing here? Well, I thought I'd try out my sea legs. But you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan. And Lieutenant Dan is just like, what am I getting myself into? He just shakes his head, but he seems actually genuinely happy to be there, right? To give himself a purpose, in my opinion. Now, he does remind Forrest who's in charge, which is always going to be Lieutenant Dan in his mind. Now, just like Forrest having issues in the beginning, Lieutenant Dan and he are just not having the best of luck, right? There's so many shrimping boats out there, like, how in the world do you just other boats get there first, right? So what does Lieutenant Dan say? Well, he sarcastically suggests that maybe Forrest should pray. Now, be careful what you wish for, Lieutenant Dan, because, of course, this is going to lead to Forrest going to church every Sunday. Now, it takes a while, but as usual, God made a way. So we see where there's this huge storm coming, and the hurricane, aptly named Carmen, is making its way through Alabama. And now, all the while, Lieutenant Dan, through this storm, is having, I feel like, the time of his life. The boat is going crazy on the water, and Lieutenant Dan is just trying to provoke God, right? Whereas Forrest is like, can I just survive? Thanks. But something truly amazing happens. There's one shrimping boat left in Alabama and where he's at. And guess what? That is Forrest and his Jenny. Now, when you go from having a ton of shrimping boats to just one, Well, one, that means you only have one source of shrimp, and two, that means that shrimping was easy then, right? Because now Bubba Grump shrimp is what they got. Now, when we move to the present, there's a man sitting next to Forrest, and he's asking Forrest to like confirm what he had just heard. And he just gets up, not like he just like shakes his head, like, yeah, we was sitting next to a millionaire, ha ha ha, right? Well, the older woman who's sitting next to this man, she's probably not 100% believing what Forrest is saying either, right? But she is more kind than this man is. So she says, well, what does Lieutenant Dan look like? And so Forrest presents her with a Fortune magazine with both Forrest and Lieutenant Dan on the cover. And of course, Forrest's eyes are shut. But, that's our lovely Forrest. Forrest, right? Now, it's a while later, and Lieutenant Dan says a thing that will forever convince me that he has come to terms with his situation and finally resolved the issues he was having with God. He sits there, it's quiet. He doesn't say it loud, and I need everybody to hear me. He says it quietly. Forrest, I never thanked you for saving my life. Now, technically, he didn't thank him, but he did, though, in Lieutenant Dan speak. Now, that being said, he hops into the water, because he can't jump, and he swims as if he has finally released the last of the weight on his shoulders. Now, if you look at the background as he's swimming, it's peaceful, it's calm, it's beautiful. Now, Forrest has also come to terms too and he realizes he never actually said so, but I think he made his peace with God, right? Because now he's realizing that Lieutenant Dan is actually better than he was. Well, here's where we get a little bit sad, okay? Later, they're eating dinner and they get a message. And so, of course, it's like, well, he's indisposed at the moment, right? And the woman, the dispatcher, says that Mama Bear is sick. Now, Forrest is not going to hesitate to go home. He jumps in the water and he goes. When he walks into the house, he sees the doctor put on leg braces, and he says, "We got you, sure got you straightened up." And that's one of the only things, that's true, but it's almost a distraction from the fact of what's going on with his mother. And so, with this matter-of-fact attitude, she tells him that she is dying. And so he sits down. He doesn't quite know how to take the news. And so he says, well, why? And she says gently, because it's her son, it's her baby, and she knows how to speak to him. She goes, it's my time. Now, she also attempts to soothe him because, the hardest part, I think, about, that is she's worried that he's not going to have someone to protect him, right? And lucky for her, she didn't have to worry about that because he does have a crew that will protect him. So, this is what she tells him, though. Don't be afraid, sweetheart. Death is just a part of life. Something we're all destined to do. I didn't know it, but I was destined to be your mama. I did the best I could. Well, I happen to believe you make your own destiny. You have to do the best with what God gave you. Well, Forrest, even though he's done all these amazing things in his life, right, he still questions her to say, what's my destiny, Mama? And she point blank tells him, you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. Life is a box of chocolates, Forrest. You never know what you're going to get. And then, so Forrest, as always, is going to he's always going to take his mom's side. And he says, Mama always had a way of explaining things to me so I could understand them. And then she kind of says quietly, I'll miss you, Forrest. And one of the last things we hear about his mama for a while is that she got the cancer and died on a Tuesday. Now, to me, right, Mama Bear was the initial OG supporter of her baby, right? And without her, he wouldn't have been able to do the things he did because he would not have been put on the path to where, to that starting point. And what this means to me, though, is that it is scripted. I understand that. I know that. But what I mean is, there are times and places where people are in your life, or you have people for a season, but they give way to these new, they know that you'll be taken care of. And yes, Mama Bear is definitely going to miss her baby bear, right? 100%. But she also knows that he's not wholly unprotected, unsupported. Because the fact is that look at Lieutenant Dan, right? Lieutenant Dan, who was mad for being saved, has now come to peace and has a purpose, right? So in the end of this, right, as devastating as it is to lose his mama, he basically is given a support system to help him through this tough time, where I don't think he would have had it prior without going down the path he went down. Well, it turns out that this is a 3-parter. And if you've ever seen Forrest Gump, you know it's a long movie. And especially trying to get through what I'm doing, it's a 3-parter. With that being said, please look out next week for the following episode to finish this 3-part series on Forrest Gump. Now, I may include some little deep dives, some different things, so let's see how everything goes, everybody. But I surely hope you've enjoyed learning about Forrest Gump up until this point. Buttercups, I thank you for listening and for being a part of this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have a great week ahead. Now, should you have any questions, comments, or, maybe future topics, you can email me at harktisthetbelle@gmail.com. You can locate me on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube. And please remember that this is a one-woman show. So, as we go on this journey together, you are growing as I grow. But until next time, Buttercups.